To start your mug rug, you will separate the pieces of your tapestry loom. You will only need one set of tools, so you can set the other set aside. Start by warping your loom and tying a knot of the warp yarn around the back side of the first notch. After creating a tight knot, you will start to go in and out of the notches or the teeth of the loom. You have two options here. One option is what I'm doing currently, and the second option is that you can go all the way around the loom so that you have longer tails. Alternatively, some people will put two strands of yarn in between each of the notches, which works better if you have a finer thread. End your warp yarn as you did with the first one by tying a knot around the loom. Next, you are going to put the weft yarn around your shuttle. Start by going around the divots at either end of the shuttle, and then you're going to wrap the yarn around this. This can also be called a bobbin. Finish wrapping your weft yarn around the shuttle or the bobbin until you have a sufficient amount. If you have a heavier weight or a bulky yarn, you will need less than if you have a finer yarn. Next, you can thread the eye of your tapestry needle with a piece of fabric. This is to keep your yarn in place so that it doesn't scrunch together when you begin weaving. Go ahead and just do 2 passes, going over, under, over, under, over, under, with a plain weave and the piece of fabric and the tapestry needle. Now use the comb, which mimics a beater on a loom, to keep the fabric even and snug together. Now you will start to use your weft yarn to weave. We're going to do a plain weave in this video, but you can feel free to experience any type of weave that you would like, including a half basket, full basket, twill, satin weave, or any other fancy weave that you may be interested in. The plain weave will go over and under each additional yarn. Once you go off to the other side of the loom, you will complete the opposite step. So where one yarn was under, it will now go over. You can use the tapestry needle to lift up the yarns if you'd like, or you can just use the shuttle with the weft yarn to weave in and out of the pieces. Each time you go to the edge of the weave, if you keep a small C, so a small amount of fabric on the end, then you comb the yarn down and then pull the selvage edge or that loop edge a little tight so that it's not pulling, but that it's resting evenly. You'll have a really nice edge of your fabric, which is also called the selvage. Continue this process of the plain weave, or whichever weave you choose to do, until you've achieved a square of fabric. Once you've done your last pass through with the weft yarn and you've combed that down, you can clip the yarn if you have excess, extending beyond your weave. If you didn't have enough, you simply just need to tie 2 pieces of yarn together. Ideally, the ends of those yarns will be on the side. Now you will start to cut the warp yarns, and these will become your tails or your tassels, and you'll finish the edges by tying knots. Keep in mind that you can shift the weave around a bit to make sure that the selvage edge looks even, and you can also pull off the opposite end that didn't have the knots and simply clip the edges in between where the yarn meets. Try to make sure that your tail ends are even, and the longer they are, the better, so that you have more space to tie off. With the two ends of your warp yarn, you are simply going to tie a knot around the warp yarn with your original weft yarn. Count the number of tassels or yarn ends that you have at the end, and you can begin to tie knots. You can do 3 together, 2 together, 4 together. Just make sure that you have somewhat of an even number. Keep in mind that the edge that you had the weft yarns going through will have 1 strand more than all of the other tassel bundles that you do. One option, as I'm doing here, which I prefer, is taking all of the yarns together and then creating a single knot. If you have really small or short ends, you can choose to tie a knot like you would with a shoelace. Just be consistent with whichever method that you choose. This method will tend to pull the weave together a little bit tighter so that it might start to curve in and pucker a little bit, whereas the other method may keep the bottom edge of the mug rug a little bit more loose. Once you're finished with the first side, you will continue this on the second side. After that is complete, you will trim the tassels so that they are an even length. You can measure this or you can simply eyeball it. After you've completed the other side, you can choose to shift the weave around so that it is the way that you would like it to be. You have now completed your mug rug. Enjoy!